This is a story that challenges everything you believe about power, loyalty, and the truths people bury in silence. Gomez Anderson spent 12 years building an empire of fear, and when only a few hours remained before federal agents dragged him away forever, he made a request that sent shockwaves through everyone in that mansion. Prepare yourself to hear one of the most astonishing revelations ever whispered between a mafia boss and the woman society told him was invisible. A story that changed not only the fate of a condemned man, but forever transformed the quiet maid who dared to see him as human. But before we continue, if you're excited to dive into this story, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us share more amazing stories. And believe me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's jump into the story. Do you know that chaos that erupts when power finally falls? Heavy boots pounding marble floors, radios crackling with federal codes, agents shouting coordinates as they sweep through rooms, the metallic click of handcuffs, furniture being overturned in the search for hidden weapons or escape routes. Helicopter blades thumping somewhere above the mansion. Orders barked. Doors kicked open. The hum of tension so thick you can taste it. Mary knew these sounds intimately on that cold November morning in 2024. 3 years she'd worked in that mansion. 3 years of wiping counters, folding clothes, polishing floors in rooms she'd never been invited to enter. 3 years of keeping her head down, her eyes averted, her mouth shut. You learn quickly in a house like that. You see nothing, you hear nothing, you survive. 42 years old, single mother of 2, employed since January 2022. You know that kind of person you would never imagine getting tangled up in a mafia boss's final hours? The kind who takes the bus to work, who sends money home to family, who just wants a steady paycheck and no trouble. Mary was that person. She needed the job too badly to ask questions about the men in expensive suits who visited at odd hours, the phone calls that made Gomez's jaw tighten, the rooms she was told never to enter. The story of Gomez Anderson's empire began long before Mary ever stepped foot in his mansion. For over a decade, he'd built something that made the city's power brokers nervous. Extortion networks that ran through the ports. Private deals that made evidence disappear. Bribery that reached so high, even senators knew his name and avoided saying it out loud. Gomez wasn't flashy. He didn't flaunt wealth or throw parties. He operated in shadows, and shadows obeyed him. Until November 4th, 2024, when everything collapsed in a single night. A federal operation involving 40 agents, 3 helicopters, and coordination so precise that not even Gomez's most paranoid security measures detected it. They came at dawn with warrants thick as novels and charges that would bury him alive. Conspiracy to commit murder. Trafficking, racketeering, witness intimidation, the kind of charges that don't come with bail or mercy. Gomez Anderson, you're under arrest. The mansion erupted into controlled chaos. Mary heard it from the kitchen where she'd been preparing to clean the east wing. She froze, cloth in hand, as boots thundered past her. She saw agents spreading through hallways she'd walked 1,000 times, now transformed into a crime scene. And then, she saw him. Gomez, hands cuffed behind his back, flanked by 2 federal agents. Orange transport suit already on. They weren't taking chances. His face was stone, jaw set, eyes scanning the destruction of his empire with the composure of a king surveying a lost battlefield. Tattoos visible on his neck, the rose inked there seeming to watch her as he passed. Their eyes met for just a second. Just long enough for Mary to see something she'd never seen before in the 3 years she'd worked there. Not rage, not defiance, vulnerability. The agents moved him toward the main entrance. Protocol dictated he'd be transported within the hour. Mary turned back to her cleaning, hands trembling slightly. This wasn't her business. This was never supposed to be her business. But then one of the senior agents stopped in the hallway. Mary could hear his voice, formal and practiced, the kind of voice that has delivered this speech 100 times before. Anderson, you're permitted one final request before transport, within reason and under supervision. Do you have any requests? Mary kept wiping the same spot on the counter, over and over, not daring to breathe too loudly. She expected him to ask for a phone call, maybe a cigarette, maybe a moment with his attorney to discuss appeals that would never work. The silence stretched so long that Mary finally glanced toward the hallway. Gomez stood perfectly still, looking not at the agents, not at the ruined mansion around him, but directly at her. Through the doorway. Across the distance. Their eyes locked again, and this time, something passed between them that Mary couldn't name. When Gomez finally spoke, his voice was quiet but clear enough to carry through the sudden hush. I want to see Mary. The words hit her like a physical blow. The cloth dropped from her hand. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Every agent in the vicinity turned to look at her. This woman in a maid's uniform, standing frozen in a kitchen doorway, suddenly at the center of something she didn't understand. One agent frowned. The maid? Mary, Gomez repeated, his gaze never leaving her face. 5 minutes. That's all I need. The agents exchanged glances. Confusion. Suspicion. But nothing in their protocol explicitly forbade it. A condemned man's last request before transport? It was almost tradition. And what harm could a maid possibly do? 5 minutes, the lead agent finally said. Supervised, in the study. Mary's legs wouldn't move. She stood there, paralyzed, as one of the agents gestured for her to follow them. What did Gomez want? Why her? In 3 years, he'd barely spoken to her beyond basic instructions. She was invisible by design. That's how she'd survived. But now, as she was escorted through the mansion, she knew by heart, everything felt different. The marble floors seemed colder, the hallways longer, the silence heavier. They brought her to Gomez's private study, a room she'd cleaned from the doorway but never entered. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. The morning sun was just breaking through, casting long shadows across the dark wood furniture. Gomez stood in the center of the room, still cuffed, still flanked by agents. But somehow, impossibly, he still looked like he owned the space. The door closed behind her with a soft click. 2 guards remained inside, watching. Recording, probably. Everything about this moment would be documented. Mary stood just inside the doorway, her hands clasped in front of her, every instinct screaming at her to stay small, stay quiet, stay invisible. But Gomez was looking at her like she was the only person in the room. He took a step closer. Then another. Slow, deliberate movements that made the guards tense, but not intervene. When he was close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of 12 years bearing down on him, he stopped. Mary, he said softly, and there was something in his voice she'd never heard before. Not the cold command she'd grown accustomed to, not the distant authority. This was something raw, something almost broken. She forced herself to meet his eyes. Sir, why me? The question hung in the air between them. Behind them, the city stretched out in the pale morning light, a city that had feared this man, profited from this man, and was now watching him fall. Gomez's jaw worked for a moment, like he was chewing on words he'd never said out loud before. When he finally spoke, His voice was barely above a whisper. Because you're the only person in this house who ever looked at me like I was human. And in that moment, everything began. Mary's breath caught in her throat. The guards shifted their weight near the door. Hands hovering near their belts, eyes tracking every micro-movement between the MAFIA boss and the MAID. Gomez took another step closer. Close enough now that Mary could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights she'd never considered. His cuffed hands rose slowly. The guards tensed, but didn't intervene, and with a gentleness that seemed impossible from those hands, he lifted her chin. Not commanding, not possessive, desperate. "They think I killed him," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Detective Marcus Chen, 3 months ago. They found him in the warehouse district with 2 bullets in his chest." Mary's heart hammered. She'd heard whispers about that case. It had been all over the news, a decorated detective murdered, allegedly by organized crime. "I didn't do it," Gomez continued, his eyes boring into hers with an intensity that made her knees weak. "I swear on everything I have left in this world, I didn't kill that man." "Then why?" Mary started. "Because someone wanted me to take the fall." His jaw clenched. "Someone who knew exactly how to make it look like my work. Someone the system would never suspect." He stepped back, glancing toward the desk. One of the guards moved forward, watching as Gomez nodded toward a small drawer. "Open it," Gomez instructed. The guard hesitated, then complied, checking carefully for weapons before pulling out something small. A USB drive, a red ribbon tied around it like a gift or a warning. Gomez's eyes found Mary's again. "That drive contains proof. Video footage from a security camera nobody knew existed. It shows who really killed Chen." "It shows me trying to stop it." Mary's hands trembled. "Why haven't you turned it in?" "Because the killer is someone they trust more than they'd ever trust me." His voice dropped even lower. "If I give it to them, it disappears. If my lawyers touch it, they disappear. But you..." He paused, something breaking in his expression. "Nobody's watching you, Mary. Nobody thinks you matter." The words should have stung, but they were true. She'd built her entire life around not mattering. "I can't," Mary whispered, shaking her head. "I can't get involved in this. I have children. I have..." "I know." Gomez's voice cracked. "I know what I'm asking, but I'm begging you." The word sounded foreign in his mouth, like he'd never spoken it before in his life. "Everyone else in my world wants something from me. Power, money, protection. You're the only person who never asked me for anything. You're the only one I can trust." Mary stared at the USB drive in the guard's hand. Such a small thing. Such a dangerous thing. "Please," Gomez said, and the desperation in that single word terrified her more than anything else. This was a man who didn't beg. A man who commanded, who intimidated, who controlled. But right now, he was just a human being, staring down 25 years for something he claimed he didn't do. Slowly, her hand shaking, Mary reached out and took the drive from the guard. The plastic felt cold against her palm, the red ribbon soft between her fingers. The moment her hand closed around it, the door burst open. More agents flooded in, voices sharp with authority. "Time's up, Anderson. Transport is waiting." They seized Gomez by both arms, pulling him toward the door. He didn't resist, but his eyes never left Mary's face as they dragged him backward through the study. At the threshold, he stopped them for just a second, muscles straining against their grip, and his voice cut through the chaos with chilling clarity. "Do not lose it. Do not tell anyone. It's your life and mine." Then he was gone, swept into the hallway, his orange suit disappearing around the corner as the sound of heavy boots faded. Mary stood alone in the study, sunlight streaming through the windows, the USB drive burning like a live coal in her closed fist. And somewhere deep in her gut, she knew nothing would ever be the same. The bus ride home felt like it lasted forever, and no time at all. Mary sat in the back, the USB drive wrapped in a paper towel and buried deep in her purse. Every time the bus hit a pothole, her heart jumped. Every time someone walked past her seat, she clutched her bag tighter. The red ribbon had felt like silk in Gomez's study. Now it felt like a noose. She kept her eyes on the window, watching the city slide past. Coffee shops, grocery stores, people living normal lives. People who weren't carrying evidence that could get them killed. People who went to work, came home, kissed their kids goodnight without wondering if someone was following them. When she finally reached her stop, Mary forced herself to walk at a normal pace. Don't run. Don't look suspicious. Just another tired woman coming home from another long shift. Her apartment building was a modest 3-story walk-up in a neighborhood that had seen better days. Cracked sidewalks, graffiti on the dumpsters, a broken security camera that the landlord kept promising to fix. Mary had always thought the broken camera was a problem. Now she wondered if it might be the only thing keeping her alive. Inside her apartment, Mary locked the door, threw the deadbolt, and leaned against it, breathing hard. The small 1-bedroom felt suffocating suddenly. The walls too thin, the windows too exposed. She dropped her purse on the kitchen counter and stared at it like it contained a bomb. Maybe she should just throw it away, toss it in the river, burn it. She didn't owe Gomez Anderson anything. He was a criminal, a mafia boss. Whatever was on that drive, it wasn't her problem. But that look in his eyes, that broken desperation, "You're the only one I can trust." Mary paced the small living room, past the couch her kids had jumped on until the springs gave out, past the photos of her daughters smiling in their school uniforms. Jasmine, 16, Keisha, 12, both staying with her sister in Atlanta for the month, while Mary worked double shifts to save up for Christmas. What if someone came looking for the drive? What if they thought her daughters knew something? Her hands trembled as she opened her laptop, an old Dell that took forever to boot up. The screen glowed to life, cursor blinking expectantly. The USB drive sat on the table next to her coffee mug from this morning. She'd left in such a hurry she hadn't even finished it. The cold coffee looked brown and sad. "Don't open it," one voice in her head whispered. "Whatever's on there, you can't unsee it." But another voice, quieter but more insistent. What if he's telling the truth? What if he's innocent? Mary had spent 3 years in that mansion learning to spot lies. You develop an instinct when you work for dangerous people. You learn to read the micro-expressions, the tension in a voice, the way eyes shift when someone's hiding something. Gomez's eyes hadn't shifted. They'd held steady, raw, with something that looked a lot like truth. Her hand moved before her mind could stop it. She picked up the drive, untied the red ribbon, and plugged it into the laptop. A single folder appeared. No label, just a date, September 3rd, 2024. Mary double-clicked. The video player opened. Grainy footage, black and white, shot from a high angle, security camera perspective. A warehouse interior, concrete floors, metal shelving casting long shadows. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. Mary expected violence. Blood. The kind of brutal scene that would justify a murder charge. Instead, she saw Gomez walk into frame, hands raised, palms out. The universal gesture of surrender. "Don't do this." His voice came through tinny but clear. "Chen, listen to me. You don't have to do this." The camera angle shifted slightly, and Mary's breath stopped. Detective Marcus Chen stepped into view, but he wasn't the victim in this scene. He was holding a gun, pointed not at Gomez, but at someone off camera, someone Mary couldn't see. "It's already done," Chen said, his voice cold. "The money's transferred. The evidence is planted. When they find him, it all points to you." "Who?" Gomez demanded, taking a step forward. "Who did you—" The gunshot made Mary jump, even though she knew it was coming. Chen fired twice, quick succession, at whoever was off camera. A body hit the ground with a sickening thud. Gomez lunged forward. "No!" But Chen swung the gun toward him. "Stay back, Anderson. You're going to take the fall for this. Your prints are already on the murder weapon I planted. Your car was seen in the area. By morning, you'll be the city's most wanted." "Why?" Gomez's voice cracked with genuine anguish. "Why frame me?" Chen smiled, a cold, calculated smile that made Mary's skin crawl. "Because nobody will question it. You're the monster everyone expects. I'm the hero, and the man I just killed? He was about to expose our entire operation." The video showed Chen calmly holstering his weapon, adjusting his jacket, and walking toward the camera. His face filled the frame for just a moment. Clear, unmistakable, deliberate, before the footage cut to black. Mary sat frozen, her hand covering her mouth. Detective Marcus Chen. Not a victim, a murderer. And Gomez had been telling the truth. She was staring at proof that would blow apart the entire case. Proof that would exonerate Gomez and destroy one of the city's most decorated detectives. Proof that someone very powerful didn't want found. A chill ran down her spine. Mary's eyes drifted to the window. The evening light was fading, casting long shadows across her street. And there, parked 3 cars down from her building, sat a dark van with tinted windows, engine running, exhaust curling into the cool air. The van hadn't been there when she came home. Mary's heart began to race. She moved to the window, careful to stay behind the curtain. As she watched, the van's passenger door opened slightly, just an inch, like someone was repositioning, keeping watch. She backed away from the window, pulse pounding in her ears. A floorboard creaked in the hallway outside her apartment. Mary froze. The building was old. The floors creaked all the time. Mrs. Patterson upstairs. The college kids next door. But this creak was right outside her door. And then, silence. The kind of silence that comes when someone is standing very still, listening, waiting. Mary's eyes darted to the deadbolt. Locked. But how long would that hold if someone really wanted in? She grabbed the USB drive, yanked it from the laptop, and shoved it deep into her bra, the one place they'd have to kill her to search. Another creak. Closer now. A shadow moved beneath the crack of her door, blocking the hallway light. Mary's hands shook as she backed toward her bedroom. Where the fire escape waited behind a window she never locked because she never thought she'd need it. Her voice came out as barely a whisper, more prayer than question. "What did you drag me into, Gomez?" Mary didn't sleep that night. She sat on her bed with the lights off, fire escape window cracked open, a kitchen knife in her trembling hand. Every sound made her flinch. Every car door slamming outside, every footstep in the hallway, every creak of the old building settling. The shadow beneath her door had eventually moved on. But Mary knew what she'd seen, what she'd felt. Someone knew. At 2:17 a.m., she heard it, the soft scrape of metal against metal. Someone working the lock on her apartment door. Mary's heart exploded in her chest. She didn't think. She just moved. Out the bedroom window onto the fire escape. The cold night air hitting her like a slap. Down the rusted metal stairs, her footsteps clanging loud enough to wake the dead. She hit the alley running, still in her pajamas, the USB drive pressed against her skin, her phone and wallet clutched in one hand. Behind her, she heard the window slam open, a voice shouting something she couldn't make out. Mary ran until her lungs burned, until she was 6 blocks away in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, bent over, gasping, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't go home. Not now. Maybe not ever. She spent the rest of the night in that diner, nursing cold coffee and trying to look like she wasn't falling apart. At 5 a.m., she changed in the bathroom sink, washing her face, fixing her hair, putting on the spare work clothes she kept in her bag. By 6 a.m., she was on the bus to work, exhausted and terrified, jumping every time someone sat down near her. Work was a fog. Mary moved through her cleaning routine on autopilot, but every sound made her spin around. Every person who looked at her too long felt like a threat. The mansion was mostly empty now, just a skeleton crew managing the property seizure. Mary cleaned rooms that would soon belong to the government, erasing the last traces of Gomez Anderson's empire. At lunch, she sat alone in the staff room, too paranoid to eat. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "We know you have it." Mary's blood went cold. She deleted the message with shaking fingers and turned off her phone. The bus ride home felt like walking toward her own execution. Mary kept her head down, watching every reflection in the window, tracking every passenger who got on or off. 3 stops from home. She noticed him. A man in a gray jacket, mid-40s, forgettable face, except for the way he'd gotten on the same bus as her, sat 4 rows back and hadn't looked at his phone once. His eyes kept drifting to her, then away, then back. When Mary got off at her stop, he got off too. She walked faster. He matched her pace, staying exactly half a block behind. Mary's mind raced. She couldn't lead him to her apartment, but where else could she go? The library? A store? How long could she keep running? She was about to duck into a corner store when a black sedan pulled up beside her. The window rolled down. "Mary, get in." She recognized the voice. Samuel Ortiz, Gomez's lawyer. Mary hesitated, glancing back. The man in the gray jacket had stopped, watching from across the street, phone now pressed to his ear. "Now," Ortiz urged, his voice tight with urgency. Mary made a choice and dove into the car. Ortiz hit the gas before she'd even closed the door. "You're being followed," he said, eyes flicking to the rear-view mirror. "Have been since yesterday." "I know," Mary gasped. "Someone tried to break into my apartment last night." Ortiz's jaw tightened. "People have died for less than what you're holding." The words hit like a punch. Mary's hand instinctively went to her chest, where the USB drive sat hidden beneath layers of fabric. "How did you—" "Gomez told me he gave you something. Didn't say what. Didn't have to." Ortiz turned down a side street, checking his mirrors constantly. "But I've been in this business long enough to know. If they're hunting you this hard, it's because you have something that can burn them all down." Mary watched the city blur past, her reflection ghostly in the window. Why did he choose me? Because everyone else in his life is compromised. His crew, his family, his business partners. They're all being watched, monitored, pressured. Ortiz glanced at her. You were invisible. You were safe. Until you weren't. He pulled over 3 blocks from her apartment. You need to make a choice. Run and hide, which means they win and Gomez dies in prison for something he didn't do. Or fight. Use what you have. Mary stared at her hands. They were shaking. They hadn't stopped shaking since yesterday. I saw the video, she whispered. He's innocent. Chen killed someone and framed Gomez for it. Ortiz's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Then you know what's at stake. As if on cue, Mary spotted them. 2 men across the street, cameras with long lenses pointed directly at the car. Photographing her, documenting her, building a file. They're not even hiding anymore, she breathed. No, Ortiz agreed grimly. They're sending a message. They want you scared. They want you to run or destroy the evidence or both. Mary thought about Gomez, sitting in a cell somewhere, facing 25 years for a murder he didn't commit. She thought about that moment in his study when he'd lifted her chin with cuffed hands and looked at her like she was the only person in the world he could trust. He could have chosen anyone. Anyone with power, with connections, with resources. He chose her. The burden of that trust felt heavier than the USB drive burning against her skin. But maybe that's exactly why it had to be her. Because she understood what it meant to be invisible, to be underestimated, to be dismissed. And maybe, just maybe, that's what made her dangerous. I need to see him, Mary said suddenly, her voice steady for the first time in 24 hours. I need to see Gomez in prison. Ortiz studied her face, then nodded slowly. I can arrange that. How soon? Tomorrow, noon, County Detention Center. He handed her a card. Call me in the morning. I'll have you cleared. Mary took the card, her decision made. She couldn't run. She couldn't hide. All she could do was move forward and hope the truth was enough to keep her alive. The county detention center smelled like every institutional building Mary had ever been in. Industrial cleaner trying to mask sweat, fear, and desperation. She stood in the processing line with the other visitors, mostly women, mothers, wives, girlfriends. All wearing their best clothes, carrying plastic bags with approved items, eyes tired from too many trips just like this one. The guards looked at Mary the way guards always looked at people like her. Like she was guilty by association. Like walking through those doors meant she'd already made too many bad choices. ID! One barked. Mary handed over her driver's license with trembling fingers. Inmate name and number. Gomez Anderson, 847329. The guard's eyebrows shot up. He exchanged a glance with his colleague, a look that said everything. The MAFIA boss. What's she doing here? Relationship to inmate? Mary hesitated. What was she? Employee? Confidant? The only person standing between him and a grave injustice? Friend, she finally said, the word feeling strange on her tongue. The guard smirked, but stamped her paperwork. No physical contact, 30 minutes, visitation room 3. The walk through the prison felt endless. Door after door, each one slamming shut behind her with a metallic clang that echoed through her bones. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, harsh and unforgiving. The hallway stretched long and sterile, punctuated by the distant sounds of shouting, metal clanging, guards' radios crackling. Mary counted her footsteps, anything to keep from turning around and running. Visitation room 3 was divided by plexiglass partitions, black phones mounted on each side. Mary sat in the hard plastic chair, hands clasped tightly in her lap, heart hammering so loud she was sure the guards could hear it. Then they brought him in. Gomez looked different, smaller somehow, though he was still the same size. The orange jumpsuit was identical to what he'd worn during transport, but now it hung on him like a costume that didn't quite fit. His hair was shorter, buzz-cut close to his skull. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. The tattoos on his neck seemed darker against his pale skin. But it was his eyes that stopped Mary cold. They held a darkness she hadn't seen before, not the controlled danger of the mansion, but something raw and desperate, like a man fighting to stay above water. He sat down slowly, reached for the phone. Mary mirrored him, pressing the receiver to her ear. For a long moment, they just looked at each other through the scratched plexiglass. "You came," Gomez said finally, his voice rough, disbelieving. Mary's throat tightened. "Because I know the truth." Something flickered across his face. Hope, fear, she couldn't tell which. "I saw the video," Mary continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I saw Chen. I saw what he did. I saw you trying to stop him." Gomez's hand tightened around the phone. His jaw clenched, working like he was trying to hold something back. Then his eyes squeezed shut, and his shoulders began to shake. Mary had never seen a man like Gomez Anderson cry. She'd imagined he didn't know how, that years of violence and power had burned that capability out of him. But tears slipped down his face now, silent and devastating. "He was my brother," Gomez whispered, voice breaking. "The man Chen killed. My younger brother, Raphael. He got clean 2 years ago. Started working legitimate jobs. Wanted out of the life." Mary's breath caught. "Chen was dirty, on the take from rival families. Raphael found out, was going to expose him."
"So Chen set it up, made it look like a gang execution, planted my fingerprints, called in anonymous tips. They found Raphael's body and my DNA evidence before I even knew he was dead." His eyes opened, red-rimmed and haunted. "I never got to say goodbye. One minute, I'm getting a call about a meeting. The next, I'm being arrested for killing my own brother.
"The one person I actually—" His voice cracked. "The one person I was trying to protect." Mary's vision blurred with tears. "Why didn't you tell your lawyer? Why didn't you—"
"Because Chen has reach everywhere. Police, prosecutors, judges. If I'd shown that video through official channels, it would have disappeared. Evidence mysteriously corrupted. Key witnesses suddenly unreachable."
Gomez leaned closer to the glass. "I needed someone outside the system. Someone they wouldn't see coming." "Someone invisible," Mary said softly. "No." Gomez's eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Someone good. Someone who wouldn't be corrupted by this world. Someone who'd see that video and do the right thing not because they owed me, but because it's who they are." Mary's hands shook. "People are following me, photographing me. Someone tried to break into my apartment. Gomez, I'm terrified."
"I know."
His voice was raw with guilt. "I'm sorry. God, Mary, I'm so sorry. But you're the only chance I have. The only person I could trust with the truth." Mary looked at this man, this feared, powerful, broken man, and saw him clearly for the first time. Not a monster, not a saint, just a human being who'd made terrible choices but didn't deserve to die in prison for a crime he didn't commit. For the murder of his own brother. She pressed her palm against the glass. "I'm going to prove your innocence," Mary said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "I don't know how yet. I don't know who to trust or where to go, but I'm not giving up that drive. I'm not letting them win." Gomez's hand rose to mirror hers on his side of the glass, their palms separated by scratched plexiglass and two completely different worlds. "Why?" he asked. "Why risk everything for me?" Mary thought about her daughters, about the world she wanted them to grow up in, about what it meant to look at someone society had written off and see their humanity anyway. "Because someone has to," she said simply. "Because it's right. Because you trusted me when you had no reason to." Something shifted in Gomez's expression. The hardness that had defined him for so long began to crack, revealing something underneath that looked almost like peace. Like a man who'd spent his whole life invisible in plain sight, seen only as a monster, a boss, a threat, finally being recognized as human. "Thank you," he whispered, the guard's voice cut through the moment. "Time's up." Mary kept her hand on the glass until the very last second, until they pulled Gomez to his feet and led him toward the door. He looked back once, eyes holding hers across the distance, and Mary knew, with absolute certainty, that there was no going back now. She had made her choice. Now she had to survive it. Mary couldn't stay invisible anymore, not if she wanted to stay alive. The morning after visiting Gomez, she made copies of the USB drive, 3 of them, each hidden in different locations. One in a safety deposit box at a bank across town, one mailed to her sister with strict instructions not to open it unless something happened to Mary, and one buried in a coffee can in the community garden 2 blocks from her apartment. The original stayed with her, always. Then she started making calls. The first journalist hung up on her. The second listened for 30 seconds before saying, "Lady, if you're trying to get a mafia boss off, you're wasting your time and mine." The third was different. "Investigative reporter, City Voice, Elena Marks speaking." Mary's hands shook as she gripped her burner phone, another purchase from her dwindling savings. "I have evidence that Detective Marcus Chen murdered someone and framed Gomez Anderson for it." Silence. Then, "I'm listening." Mary told her everything. The video, the confession, the threats. Elena asked sharp questions, took detailed notes, and finally said the words Mary desperately needed to hear. "If what you're saying is true, this is the biggest story of the decade, but I need to see the video. Can we meet?" They arranged to meet at a coffee shop in 3 days. Public place? Daytime? Safe. Except nothing was safe anymore. That afternoon, Mary was walking to the bus stop when she heard the engine rev behind her. She turned just in time to see a black SUV jump the curb, barreling straight toward her. Mary dove sideways, hitting the pavement hard as the SUV roared past, missing her by inches. Her knee split open on the concrete, her palms burned. The vehicle screeched around the corner and disappeared. No license plate. A woman rushed over to help her up. "Oh my God, are you okay? Should I call the police?" Mary's blood went cold at the word police. "No, I'm fine, I'm fine." She limped to the bus stop, every nerve screaming, adrenaline making her hands shake so badly she could barely hold her phone. They weren't watching anymore. They were actively trying to kill her.
When Mary finally made it home that evening, exhausted and terrified, she knew something was wrong the moment she reached her floor. Her apartment door stood slightly ajar, the frame splintered where someone had kicked it in. Her stomach dropped. Inside was chaos. Furniture overturned, cushions slashed open, drawers dumped onto the floor. They'd torn through everything. Her closet, her bathroom, even ripped up the floorboards in places. Looking for the drive. Mary stood in the wreckage of her life, hands clenched into fists, tears of rage and fear streaming down her face. They'd violated her space, destroyed what little she had, and they still hadn't found what they were looking for. Because she'd learned. She'd adapted. She was no longer the invisible maid who kept her head down, but the message was clear. They were closing in. Mary couldn't stay here. She grabbed a bag, threw in clothes and essentials, and left without looking back. She'd stay with a coworker tonight. Then maybe a motel. Keep moving. Make herself a harder target. 2 days later, she met Elena at the coffee shop. The journalist's eyes widened as she watched the video on Mary's laptop, her expression cycling through shock, horror, and something that looked like vindication. "This is explosive," Elena breathed. "This could take down half the department, but Mary..." She looked up, face grave. "The moment I publish this, you become the star witness in the biggest corruption case this city has ever seen. Are you ready for that?" Mary thought about Gomez behind that glass, tears streaming down his face as he talked about his brother. She thought about Raphael, murdered for trying to do the right thing. "Yes," she said. "Publish it." Elena nodded. "Give me 48 hours to verify sources and get legal clearance. Then this goes live." Mary left the coffee shop feeling something that almost resembled hope. It lasted exactly 20 minutes. She was walking through a parking garage when 2 men appeared from behind a van. One grabbed her arm, the other reached for her bag. "Where is it?" the first one growled. "The drive." "Where's the original?" Mary's training from 3 years of watching dangerous men kicked in. She stomped on his instep, twisted hard, and when his grip loosened, she ran. Footsteps pounded behind her. Shouts echoed through the concrete structure. Mary burst out onto the street, flagged down a taxi, and threw herself inside. "Drive, now, anywhere." The taxi pulled away just as the men emerged from the garage, faces twisted with rage. Mary sat in the back seat, gasping, her whole body trembling. This was escalating faster than she could handle. She needed help, real help, the kind that didn't come from lawyers or journalists. She needed someone from Gomez's world. That night, holed up in a dingy motel room, Mary pulled out the piece of paper Ortiz had given her. On the back, in Gomez's handwriting, was a phone number. No name. Just 10 digits and 2 words. Last resort. His brother. The one person who might be willing to protect her, but who was also dangerous enough to make Mary's situation infinitely more complicated. Her finger hovered over the screen. This was a line she couldn't uncross. Calling Gomez's brother meant admitting she couldn't do this alone. It meant pulling someone from the underworld deeper into her life. But those men in the parking garage would have killed her. Chen would keep sending people until one of them succeeded. Mary hit dial. The phone rang once. Twice. 3 times. Then a voice answered, deep, gravelly, carrying the same controlled danger she'd heard in Gomez's voice, but rougher, more volatile. "Where did you get this number?" Mary's throat went dry. In the background, she could hear music, low voices, the unmistakable atmosphere of a place where dangerous business was conducted. She swallowed hard and said the only thing that might keep him on the line. "Your brother gave it to me, and he's going to die in prison if you don't help me." Silence stretched out,
heavy with calculation and threat. Then, keep talking. Gomez's brother had a name that carried weight in the underworld. Victor Anderson. They met in the back room of a garage on the east side, the kind of place where cash changed hands and questions weren't asked. Victor was older than Gomez by 3 years, broader in the shoulders, with scars that told stories his brother's tattoos only hinted at. He'd listened to Mary's story without interruption, his dark eyes never leaving her face. When she finished, he'd nodded once and said, "You have 48 hours before this goes public?" "Yes, the journalist is verifying sources." "Then we dig deeper, fast." He'd pulled out a laptop that looked out of place in his scarred hands. "Gomez trusted you with that drive, but I'm guessing there's more on it than just the video." He was right. For the next 6 hours, Mary and Victor went through the USB drive file by file. Hidden beneath the video footage were encrypted documents, financial records, text message screenshots, recorded phone calls. Evidence Raphael had been gathering before he died, and the picture they painted was far worse than Mary had imagined. Detective Marcus Chen wasn't just dirty. He was the linchpin in a massive corruption network that stretched from the police department into City Hall. For the past 5 years, he'd been taking payments from the Volkov family, a rival crime organization that had been fighting Gomez for control of the port operations. "The Volkovs wanted Gomez out of the picture," Victor said, scrolling through a spreadsheet that detailed payments in the hundreds of thousands. "But they couldn't touch him directly, too much heat, so they bought themselves a decorated detective." Mary stared at the screen, her stomach churning. Chen was supposed to arrest Gomez? No, he was supposed to destroy him. Victor clicked on another file, a recorded phone conversation. Chen's voice came through clearly. "Raphael's getting too close. He's got evidence of our arrangement. If he talks, we all go down." A second voice, heavily accented. "So make him disappear, and make it look like his brother did it." The perfect frame job. Gomez gets life in prison, the Volkovs take over his territory, and I retire to the Bahamas in 5 years. Laughter. Cold, calculated laughter. Mary felt sick. Raphael died because he was trying to expose this? "My little brother was always the moral one," Victor said, voice rough with grief. "Got out of the family business, thought he could make a difference as an informant. Instead, they made him a corpse and a weapon." Another file contained something even more damaging, evidence that a city councilman and the deputy police chief were also on the Volkov payroll. This wasn't just a murder frame-up. This was a systematic takeover of the city's power structure, with Gomez Anderson as the convenient scapegoat. "This is bigger than I thought," Mary whispered. "If we expose this, half the city's leadership goes down," Victor finished. "Which means they'll kill anyone who threatens to expose them." He looked at her with something that might have been respect. "You're in the center of a war you didn't ask for, Mary. These people don't just threaten, they erase." Mary thought of her daughters, safe in Atlanta. She'd called her sister that morning, voice shaking, and told her not to come home for Thanksgiving. "There's an emergency at work," she'd lied. "I'll come to you for Christmas instead." Her sister had heard the fear in her voice. "Mary, what's going on?" "Just trust me. Keep the girls close. I'll explain everything soon." Now, sitting in this garage with a man whose hands had probably taken lives, Mary understood the full weight of what Gomez had given her. Not just evidence of his innocence, evidence of systemic corruption that would bring down everyone involved. "Elena needs to see this," Mary said. "All of it." Victor nodded. "I'll get you there safely. But Mary, once this breaks, there's no going back. You'll be testifying in court, looking over your shoulder for years, maybe forever. These people have long memories." So did Raphael. Mary said quietly. And he died trying to do the right thing. I won't let that be for nothing. They compiled everything onto a secure drive. Victor made copies, distributed them to people he trusted. Insurance, he called it. If something happens to you or me, this still gets out. At 11 p.m., Victor drove Mary back to her old apartment to grab more clothes. She'd been staying in motels, never the same place twice, but she needed a few more things before meeting Elena tomorrow morning. 5 minutes, Victor said, engine idling at the curb. In and out. The building was dark, quiet. Mary's footsteps echoed in the stairwell. Her apartment door had been repaired. Cheap job. Landlord hadn't even called to check if she was okay. But it opened with the new key they'd left in her mailbox. Inside, the apartment still smelled like violation. They'd cleaned up the worst of it, but Mary could see where they'd torn through her life. She moved quickly, grabbing clothes, her daughter's photos, important documents. Stuffed everything into a duffel bag. That's when she heard it. A footstep in the hallway. Slow. Deliberate. Just outside her door. Mary froze, heart hammering. Victor was downstairs. Her phone was in her pocket. She could run. The doorknob turned. Mary hadn't locked it, hadn't thought she'd be here long enough to need to. The door opened slowly, revealing a figure backlit by the hallway light. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket with hands buried in the pockets. The kind of stance that spoke of concealed weapons and professional intent. The man stepped into the apartment, and the hallway light caught his face. 30-something, clean-shaven, dead eyes. He looked at Mary the way someone might look at a problem that needed solving. Mary Walsh? His voice was flat, businesslike. Mary's hand closed around the only weapon she had, a heavy flashlight on the counter. Depends on who's asking. The man pulled his hand from his pocket. Not a gun. A photograph of her daughters, Jasmine and Keisha, taken recently outside their school in Atlanta. Mary's blood turned to ice. You have something that belongs to my employers, the man said calmly. You're going to give it to me, or your daughters are going to have a very unfortunate accident on their way home from school tomorrow. Every maternal instinct in Mary's body screamed. Every ounce of fear crystallized into something sharp and clear. This was it, the moment where she either surrendered and let evil win, or she fought back and risked everything she loved. The man took a step closer. So, he said, pulling a gun from his other pocket, silencer already attached. What's it going to be? Mary's fingers tightened on the flashlight, her eyes locked on the weapon pointed at her chest, and she realized with cold clarity that she might not survive the next 60 seconds. Time slowed to a crawl. Mary saw the hitman's finger tighten on the trigger, saw the cold calculation in his eyes, saw her entire future, her daughters growing up without a mother, Gomez dying in prison, the truth buried forever, collapsing into this single moment. She didn't think. She just moved. Mary hurled the flashlight with everything she had. It hit the hitman's wrist just as he fired. The shot went wild, punching through the wall beside her head. Plaster exploded. Her ears rang. The hitman cursed, adjusting his aim. Mary dove behind the couch, scrambling for anything she could use as a weapon. Her hands closed around a lamp. Pathetic, but it was something. Come out, the hitman said calmly, professionally. I'll make it quick. You won't feel... The door exploded inward. Victor Anderson moved like violence given form. He crossed the apartment in 3 strides, his hand clamping around the hitman's gun arm. There was a sickening crack, the sound of bone breaking,
and the weapon clattered to the floor. The hitman was good, trained. He threw an elbow that would have crushed Victor's throat if it had landed. But Victor was better. He ducked, drove his shoulder into the man's gut, and slammed him against the wall hard enough to crack the drywall. They fought with brutal efficiency. No wasted movement, no dramatic posturing. Just two men trying to kill each other in a confined space. Mary pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering, unable to look away. The hitman got his hand free, pulled a knife from somewhere, slashed at Victor's face. Victor jerked back. The blade missed by millimeters and drove his fist into the man's kidney. Once, twice, 3 times. The hitman gasped, stumbled. That's when he went for his backup weapon. Mary saw it before Victor did. A small pistol strapped to the hitman's ankle. His hand was moving toward it, fingers stretching. "Victor!" Mary screamed. Victor's eyes flicked down. He saw the threat. The gunshot was deafening in the small apartment. Mary's vision whited out. Her ears rang. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what had just happened. When her vision cleared, she saw the hitman on the floor, blood pooling beneath him, eyes staring at nothing. Victor stood over him, the backup pistol now in his hand, breathing hard, blood on his knuckles. "You okay?" he asked Mary, voice steady despite the violence. Mary couldn't speak, could only nod, trembling from head to foot. Victor checked the hitman's pulse. Protocol, even when the outcome was obvious, then turned to Mary. "We need to go. Now. His people will come looking when he doesn't report in." "The photo?" Mary gasped. "My daughters!" Victor picked it up from where it had fallen, studied it for a moment, then pulled out his phone. "Send me their address. I'll have someone watching them within the hour. No one touches them, I promise." "Why?" The question tore out of Mary. "Why are you doing this? Why risk everything for me?" Victor looked at her with eyes that held the same intensity as his brother's, but harder, forged in different fires. "Gomez said anyone who touches you dies," he said simply. "That's not a request in our world. That's a blood oath." "But why?" Mary pressed. "I'm nobody. I'm just—" "You're his only chance," Victor interrupted. "The only person in this entire city who gave enough of a damn about the truth to risk your life for it. You think that's nothing? You think that's nobody?" He grabbed the duffel bag she'd packed, checked the hallway, then motioned for her to follow. They moved fast, down the stairs, into Victor's car, pulling away from the curb just as sirens began to wail in the distance. Someone had called in the gunshot. "Where are we going?" Mary asked. "To end this." Victor handed her his phone. "Call your journalist. Tell her we're coming now. Tonight. With everything." Elena Marks met them at the City Voice offices at midnight. The building was mostly empty, just a skeleton crew and the hum of computers. She took one look at Victor, the blood on his shirt, the hardness in his eyes, and said, "Should I ask?" "No," Victor and Mary said simultaneously. They laid it all out. The video, the financial records, the phone recordings, the evidence of the conspiracy that reached from the police department to City Hall. Elena's eyes grew wider with each document, her fingers flying across her keyboard as she took notes. "This is—" She paused, searching for words. "This is going to blow up the entire city power structure." "Can you protect her?" Victor asked, nodding toward Mary. Elena looked at Mary, this exhausted, terrified woman who'd risked everything for the truth, and nodded. "We'll put her in protective custody through our legal team until she can testify. And this story goes live in 6 hours. Once it's public, killing her becomes pointless. The evidence is already out. Mary felt something inside her chest loosen slightly. Not safety, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. Elena worked through the night, writing, fact-checking, consulting with lawyers. At 6 a.m., just as the sun was rising over the city, the story went live on every platform the City Voice had. The headline was simple and devastating. Decorated detective murdered informant, framed mafia boss in massive corruption scandal. Below it, the video of Chen killing Raphael Anderson. The evidence of bribes, of conspiracy, of systematic corruption. Mary watched it spread across social media in real time. Shares, retweets, comments exploding with shock and outrage. Within 2 hours, the FBI announced they were opening an investigation. By noon, Detective Marcus Chen had been placed on administrative leave, his home surrounded by federal agents. By 3 p.m., arrest warrants had been issued for Chen and 3 other officials named in the evidence. By evening, every major news network in the country was covering the story. Footage of Gomez being led into prison. Then footage of the Anderson mansion. Then Elena's calm, professional voice explaining the evidence. And through it all, one name kept appearing. Mary Walsh. The maid who refused to stay silent. Mary watched it all from a safe house Elena's legal team had arranged, Victor standing guard outside her door. She should have felt triumphant, vindicated. Instead, she felt exhausted, terrified, and strangely hollow. But when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, her breath caught. "They're reopening my case. Emergency hearing in 48 hours. Mary, thank you." Gee, she stared at those words through blurring tears. The world was finally beginning to believe that Gomez Anderson might be innocent. And it had taken everything Mary had, her safety, her peace, nearly her life, to make them see it. She looked at Victor through the doorway. He met her eyes and nodded once, a warrior's acknowledgement of another warrior. Mary nodded back. They weren't done yet. The fight was just beginning. But for the first time since Gomez had handed her that USB drive, Mary felt something she hadn't felt in days. Hope. The county detention center felt different this time. Mary walked through the same doors, past the same guards, through the same metal detectors. But now, cameras followed her. Reporters shouted questions from behind barriers. Federal agents nodded respectfully as she passed. She wasn't invisible anymore. The guard who processed her paperwork recognized her immediately. "Ms. Walsh," he said, voice notably softer than her first visit. "He's been asking about you every day." Mary's throat tightened. "Is he okay?" "Better now, I think." The guard stamped her visitor pass. "Takes courage to do what you did." Mary didn't feel courageous. She felt exhausted, wrung out, like she'd survived a hurricane and was still checking for injuries. The walk to Visitation Room 3 felt shorter this time. Or maybe Mary had just changed enough that the distance didn't feel as insurmountable. When they brought Gomez in, Mary's breath caught. He looked different, still wearing the orange jumpsuit, still buzz-cut and tired, but something fundamental had shifted in his bearing. The dangerous edge was still there, would probably always be there, but underneath it was something she hadn't seen before. Peace. Or the beginning of it. He sat down, picked up the phone, and his eyes found hers through the plexiglass. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. There was too much to say, and no words big enough to hold it. "They're saying I might be out in 72 hours, Gomez finally said, his voice rough with emotion he wasn't trying to hide. "Emergency hearing tomorrow. The DA is dropping charges. Federal investigation into Chen and everyone connected. Mary's eyes burned with tears. I know. I've been watching the news. Because of you. He leaned closer to the glass. Everything that's happening, the investigation, the arrests, the truth finally coming out, it's because of you, Mary. She shook her head. It's because of Raphael. He gathered the evidence. He died trying to. And you made his death mean something. Gomez interrupted, his voice fierce. You could have thrown that drive away. Run. Hidden. Stayed safe. But you didn't. Mary pressed her palm against the glass, and Gomez mirrored her movement. Their hands separated by the scratched plexiglass barrier that might not stand between them much longer. I was terrified every single day, Mary whispered. They tried to kill me, threatened my daughters, destroyed everything I had. I know, Gomez's voice cracked. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure you and your girls are protected, safe. I swear it, Mary. I don't want your protection, Mary said softly. I just want you to have a chance at a real life, one where you're not defined by the worst thing you've been accused of. Gomez's eyes glistened. I never asked anyone for help until you, he said, the words coming out broken, raw. My whole life I built walls, made myself untouchable, relied on fear instead of trust. And then I met you, this quiet woman who cleaned my floors and saw me as human when the whole world saw me as a monster. Mary felt tears slip down her cheeks. That's why you deserved it. The guard's voice cut through the moment. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Such a small amount of time for everything Mary wanted to say. What happens now? She asked. When you get out? Gomez's jaw tightened. I testify. Help the feds tear down everyone involved. Then. He paused, something vulnerable crossing his face. Then I figure out who Gomez Anderson is when he's not running an empire or fighting for his life. And Mary Walsh figures out who she is when she's not invisible, Mary added softly. You were never invisible to me, Gomez said. From the first day you walked into that mansion, I saw you. Maybe that's why I trusted you. Because you were real in a world of people wearing masks. The guard approached. Time's up. Mary kept her hand on the glass until the last possible second, until they pulled Gomez to his feet. He looked back at her, and in his eyes, she saw gratitude, respect, and something else. Something complicated and dangerous and tender that neither of them had words for yet. See you on the outside, he said. Mary nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. 3 weeks later, the media storm had been relentless. Detective Marcus Chen, arrested on multiple charges, including murder, conspiracy, and corruption. The deputy police chief resigned. The city councilman fled the country, only to be extradited back in handcuffs. The Volkov organization's leadership indicted on federal racketeering charges. And through it all, Mary Walsh, formerly invisible MAID, now key witness, had told her story over and over, to federal prosecutors, to grand juries, to reporters who wanted to know how an ordinary woman had brought down a corrupt empire. I just did what was right, she'd say, uncomfortable with the label of hero they kept trying to pin on her. Gomez's conviction had been overturned. All charges dropped, a formal apology issued by the DA's office, and a settlement that would ensure Mary and her daughters never had to worry about money again. But money wasn't what Mary had been fighting for. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when Mary finally felt safe enough to go for a walk. The park near her new apartment, Victor had insisted she move, somewhere safer, somewhere the past couldn't find her, was nearly empty. Fall leaves crunched beneath her feet. The air was cool and clean. For the first time in a month, Mary breathed without fear tightening her chest. She was watching a pair of kids on the playground when she heard footsteps behind her. Steady, purposeful. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but something, intuition, hope, recognition, made her turn instead. Gomez stood there, 20 feet away, bathed in afternoon sunlight that seemed wrong for a man who'd spent so much of his life in shadows. He wasn't wearing orange anymore, just dark jeans and a simple black jacket, hair grown out slightly. The tattoos on his neck visible but somehow less menacing in natural light. He didn't move closer, didn't invade her space, just stood there, hands in his pockets, watching her with those intense dark eyes that had started all of this. "Mary," he said simply. She couldn't speak. Could only stare at this man who was supposed to be in prison, who was supposed to die there, now standing free because she'd refused to let injustice win. "I wanted to thank you," Gomez continued, his voice carrying across the distance. "In person, without glass between us." Mary found her voice. "You already did. In the letters, in the settlement. You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." He took one step closer, then stopped, respecting the boundary. "You gave me my life back. There's no payment big enough for that. No words adequate enough." The autumn breeze moved between them, carrying leaves and possibilities neither of them had dared to imagine weeks ago. "What will you do now?" Mary asked. Gomez's lips curved in something that might have been the beginning of a real smile. "Live. Actually live, for maybe the first time. Victor's helping me set up something legitimate. No more empire. No more shadows." He paused. "What about you?" "Same," Mary said softly. "Figure out who I am when I'm not surviving. Maybe go back to school. Give my daughters a life where their mother isn't looking over her shoulder." "They'll still need protection," Gomez said. "Victor's people will—" "I know." Mary smiled slightly. "Your brother made that very clear." Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, just weighted with everything they'd been through, everything they'd survived, everything that remained unspoken. "I should go," Gomez finally said. I needed you to know that what you did." His voice caught. "It mattered. You mattered." Mary took a step toward him. Just one, closing the distance slightly but not completely. "So did you," she said. "You trusted me when you had no reason to. You saw me when I'd spent years making sure nobody did. That matters too." Gomez nodded, something unreadable moving through his expression. Gratitude, respect, connection. And maybe, just maybe, the fragile beginning of something neither of them had names for yet. "Take care of yourself, Mary Walsh," he said. "You too, Gomez Anderson." He turned to leave, took 3 steps, then paused and looked back. "If you ever need anything—" "I know where to find you," Mary finished. He smiled, a real smile this time, the kind that reached his eyes and made him look younger, less dangerous, more human. Then he walked away, disappearing into the golden afternoon light,
leaving Mary standing in the park with the autumn breeze and the sound of children's laughter and the strange, terrifying, beautiful knowledge that her life would never be ordinary again. She'd touched the darkness and survived. She'd seen a monster and found a man. And whatever came next, testimony, trials, new beginnings, she would face it the way she'd faced everything else. With her head up, her heart steady, and the truth burning bright in her hands. Mary turned back toward home, leaves crunching beneath her feet, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she smiled. The invisible woman had become impossible to ignore, and the dangerous man had finally been seen for who he truly was. It wasn't an ending. It was a beginning neither of them had dared to imagine, but perhaps that was exactly what made it worth everything they'd risked to get here.